thankful for waving stories. Hold on to the lifetime we won't get back. I know these rivers carry on. People tend to stick to you after time. Places tend to do the same as we do. This river carries on and on.
Hello and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and today's episode is actually an episode that maybe you were one of the people that requested it, and I take requests, I take them very seriously. There's some requests that I will not honor, but there's very few that there's very few of those that I will not honor, but this person happened to have been on my list already, so it just kind of worked out. So I am pleased to welcome Dawn Brewers from Fortitude Community Outreach to the podcast.
Thank you.
Oops, that's the wrong one. There we go. I got to have a round of applause for you.
Nice.
So, Dawn, you and I, we figured this out. We briefly met some years ago, but we haven't actually had a sit-down conversation like this. And since I first met you and first heard about Fortitude Community Outreach, things have just seemed to, from the outside anyway, it looks like things are going really well. But first, before we get into Fortitude, I want to learn about you. Where does Dawn come from? Are you a Kankakee County native, or are you from outside the area? Or
Yeah, close. I grew up on a farm in Lake Village, which is literally right across the border in Indiana.
Okay.
My dad was a farmer, and when I was in junior high, my mom started teaching at Olivet. So I went to Olivet, got married, planted myself here, and I've been here ever since.
Okay.
So I've been a social worker in the community in one capacity or another since 1996, which seems a very long time ago now.
But it also feels like yesterday, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I still think, 96? That was what, like 10 years ago, right?
Yep. Nope.
Yeah. It's like, oh wait, 1, 2. Oh yeah,
Yep.
that's almost 30 years ago. Whoops.
Don't.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think every time I think of 96, usually one of the first things that pops into my brain is Space Jam, because I think that was the year Space Jam came out, or something like that. I always think of things like
that's the year I graduated, got married, settled in Kankakee.
So as what's Lake? I've never been to Lake Village. I mean, I've talked to radio listeners, because sometimes some of the people that win contests on the Milner media stations, they get our stations, the Valley and WFAV and River Country, they reach Lake Village. So sometimes our winners end up being from there, but I've actually never been there. It's a pretty small town, right?
Yeah. The joke is that if you blink, you miss it.
Oh, okay.
When you drive through.
Yeah.
We're not known for anything except farms. And then the next town over is Rose Lawn, which is known for their nudist camps. So...
Oh, there is a nudist camp there.
There
That's
was two.
right.
There may be just one now, but there were two when I was growing up.
What were the two?
It was Ponderosa Sun Club and Naked City.
Okay, Okay, I was going to say.
This is why I came onto your podcast.
Right. This is what we're talking about. This is the important subject. So I'm glad that we've now transitioned. This podcast is no longer about Fortitude. Let's forget about that. This is about Ponderosa Sun Club. I couldn't remember if Ponderosa was actually in Indiana or not.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're both in Rose Lawn.
Yeah, that's That's so funny. My friend Mike Tamano from the Valley,
Yeah.
who's the morning show host, they're always joking about the Ponderosa
Yeah.
Sun Club, and that still exists. I've
Mm-hmm.
never heard of Naked City. That was a new one to me, but that'll be on the next podcast. Of course, that's not any affiliation to Kankakee County, but I would imagine that would be interesting. What was it like growing up near? I mean,
there's always a curiosity as a child.
Yeah.
But it's very blocked off. It certainly wasn't in my sphere of influence, and so I knew next to nothing.
I know at some point or another, I could swear I drove by like the entrance, right? Because there's a sign for Ponderosa, but obviously it's the actual camp or the club is way down
into the woods. Yeah.
It's way into the woods. So so growing up, what were you told about it? Or were there, when you ever drove past it or whatever, what did your parents tell you it was instead of, or did they just say, yeah, that's a nudist camp?
I think that's about all that I knew, left the rest to imagination.
Yeah. Which is dangerous.
Yeah, and I still know next to nothing, and I don't need to know any more than that.
I'm just curious because obviously, Rose Lawn is not far from Kankakee, but still, we don't have a nudist.
No, it's a bit
as
of
far as
world.
I know, we don't have any nudist camps in the county. There could be a secret one somewhere.
It could be. What's funny is that in Europe, that it's nothing.
Right. It's true. They're everywhere. Nudist beaches, nudist camps, all that stuff.
We Americans are all uptight about it.
We really are. But anyway, so you grew up in Lake Village. You go to Olivet Nazarene.
Yep.
As a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get your first job as a social worker?
My first job was at Helen Wheeler Center.
Okay.
I worked with adult mental health. Loved that. Moved to Thresholds, which is also adult mental health. That's more of severe psychiatric. And then I went back and became a school social worker. So got a little extra education and became certified in school social work. And I did that up until 2014.
Is that when you got your PhD then? Or
no. Then in 2014, I started teaching full-time at Olivet.
Oh, okay.
And so I started my PhD then. And then I left Olivet in 2017 and finished, I think, the year after that.
I myself, I don't even know if I properly know what the role of a social worker is. I feel I feel like it's one of those things that gets misconstrued or misidentified, or
we take children away. That's what people about.
Well, that's what I mean. I feel like what is the definition of what really is a social worker?
Yeah.
I guess to put it in layman's terms.
Okay, well, that's an excellent question. So we kind of jokingly in the field have. When I met you coming in today, you said something about a PhD in psychology, and I gave you that look.
You gave me that look.
Oh, no.
I could have. See, like I said, we've only, from my recollection, we met that one time, and I could have swore that someone told me, they had you written down as Dr. Brewers, and I thought it was psychology, but like I said, that's been 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, we couldn't remember. We kind of are very separatist in terms of psychology, counseling, social work.
Yeah, they really are separate, and that's why I want to know in layman's terms, like a social worker.
So what distinguishes social work is that we have a dual focus on meeting individual needs and a macro purpose, which is more of advocacy policy. So we recognize that individual issues are caused by systemic issues. So poverty, historically, people looked at poverty as an individual fault.
Weakness.
You were poor, you had an addiction, you had whatever that vulnerability was, it was because you had a weakness, you had a fault. So we have since realized that there's systemic issues that cause poverty. There's systemic issues that cause addiction. And so we can address the person But if we don't also address the systemic issues, then we're just, the whole, you can give a person a fish for a day and they can eat for a day. You
And
teach
then-
them how to fish
Mhm.
and you make lifelong changes. And so even when I was at Olivet, my profs would say, you're a macro social worker. And that's because I have always seen the big picture. And, I have a private practice as well. So I love working with individuals, but I also love the whole area of making a difference systemically. So that can get overwhelming because change at this systemic
yeah.
level happens very slowly.
Yes, it does.
But when you do make those changes, it's exhilarating, and that's when you make those ripples. I tell my students, social workers can get overwhelmed with the idea of changing the world. I'm using air quotes here, changing the world. We don't have to change the whole world, but when we do a little something, we're making a ripple effect in the world. So, we have to think about those things that some people make huge changes, some people make little changes. It all makes a difference.
And the little changes are sometimes the ones that actually make the biggest difference, because your little ripple could impact just one person.
Yeah.
And then that's the one person that ends up making the big wave.
Yeah. You never know.
You never know who that person's going to be.
Yeah.
So going from, even from if you're doing a more individualized standpoint, that can even take a long time, though, too, to make a difference in that person's life.
Yeah. So that micro individual focus of social work, psychology, counseling is very important. So I don't diminish that in any way.
Oh, yeah.
But to be considered a social work as a profession, it mandates, we have an ethical mandate to be involved in both of those micro and macro levels of change and care.
So you mentioned students. So are you still teaching at Olivet then?
Yeah. Not at Olivet,
No.
but I teach at Walden University, which is where I got my PhD.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Awesome. So you've got, you busy. I'm surprised I was able to
My
talk
plate
with you
is
today.
full.
Yeah. So you teach them, and then you have your own practice, and then Fortitude
That's
is
my full-time job.
That's really your full-time gig.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get into you get out of school, you're working at these different organizations. Where does Fortitude come into play?
So what's interesting is that in all of those areas, I worked with the homeless in one way or another. So I have that long experience of seeing kind of homelessness from many different angles. And then when I started teaching at Olivet, I got involved with, it's called the Continuum of Care, which is really a local group of homeless providers or other supporters of the homeless. Like there's some local pastors involved. All around the United States, there's Continuum of Cares. It's just mandated by the federal government. So I started getting involved with them, and true to my very macro self, it was really clear really quickly that there were huge gaps in what our homeless needed for services. So at that point, I think I started on Salvation Army's board of directors, and then eventually, I think in 2016, decided that the best place to start to fill those gaps was doing street outreach, because that was us meeting them where they were, which was on the street. One of the things I noticed as a problem/gap in care for the homeless was that it was a very your traditional agency approach. So I'm sitting in my office in my agency behind my desk. If you want help, you need to come in.
That's daunting.
Yes. So you need to come in, and then I'm going to tell you what services I have funding for. And so I kind of set out to flip that paradigm, which was I'm going to come to you and I'm going to find out from you what those needs are. and I'm going to figure out a way to meet those. Not me, but we're going to figure out a way to get those needs met. So we started street outreach really with the intention of, trying to meet some needs, some very basic needs, hygiene and blankets and coats and things like that. But to get to know the homeless, get to be trusted within their community, and then learn from them. What are their biggest needs? How can we best address those? So that was a huge time of learning for us. We've changed a lot since then just because we have learned a lot. And so we just constantly morphed based on the information we were learning from them. So in 2008, 2017, I think, the Salvation Army on-site shelter closed.
And that was because there was a women's shelter at Salvation Army.
They had both.
One closed before the other, right? I think maybe the women's shelter went first. I
can't remember.
I can't remember either, but now they're both closed.
Yes. Yeah. So they have switched their sheltering models. So now they provide hotel vouchers. But, what we were seeing was there was still this huge need for an on-site shelter. And we see that all the time. For example, the agencies are open Monday through Friday till 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So if you become homeless on Friday night at 8 o'clock, what do you do?
Yeah.
Nothing's open until Monday. If Monday's a holiday, which it often is,
then
you've got nothing till Tuesday. So, there's and so the federal government's priority right now is rapid rehousing, is what they call it, which is never rapid. Let's be honest, and that is getting people into apartments as quick as possible. But that's not going to happen.
That's a huge long-term goal.
It is. Right. So
that takes a long time, I would imagine, right?
So if you become homeless on Friday night at 8 o'clock, it's not like you're going to be back into an apartment anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just curious in your experience, because I'm sure you do help people get to that goal of in an apartment. How long does that actually take? In your experience? It
completely depends on the person. We had a couple people last year who saved their stimulus checks, and then it was really just a matter of finding an apartment. Once they found an apartment, they were able to get in really quickly. But they were also individuals who had the capability to live on their own. A lot of the individuals that we serve are not near the point where they're ready to be in an apartment of their own, pay their rent, pay the electric bill. That's a process of preparing them for that, educating, becoming financially independent. So there are programs with some of the agencies where they can assist you, maybe even up to a year with funding once they get you into an apartment. But again, you have to be ready to do that. And a lot of our individuals are not near there.
So you're talking with those individuals several months to years, right? At that point.
Yep. It's definitely a process. And we definitely need to grow our capacity with case management. So right now our focus is on the emergency sheltering. And we work with our individuals as much as we are able to move them to the next step, whether that's work or an apartment. But when we get the funding and the capacity to be able to provide that intense service during the day when other agencies are open, that's when we're going to be able to really make transformational change.
So you're more or less there for those hours when those agencies aren't open.
Yeah. We're not able to provide many services during the day. So we're kind of depending on the other agencies to provide a lot of that right now, which is hard because, I can't control where our folks go. Once they leave our shelter in the morning, I can't make them go if they don't want to. So we kind of lose them during the day.
So I'm sorry, going back to what you were talking about with the rapid
rehousing.
Yeah, rapid rehousing. How does that work? Or what were you going to say about that? I'm sorry.
That's a good question. So I think I was saying that there's a need for emergency sheltering.
Okay.
When people become homeless, they need a place to land immediately until they can access some more long-term assistance. And there is some of that available. And so the frustration is that the federal government, state government really don't recognize an emergency overnight shelter as that big of a priority. So we figured out right away that if this was going to happen, it was going to happen by support of the community. We weren't going to be able to rely on, a lot of federal grants, state grants to be able to do that. The benefit of that is that our funds are unrestricted to do what we set out to do, which is to provide the services that are needed, not simply the services that we're funded to provide. So a lot of times what we see in social services is somebody hears about a grant and they think, oh, that's a service that I can do, so I'm going to go for that grant. Well, now you have a pot of money that has to be spent on
that one thing, right? Or that...
Right, that one thing with 100 restrictions, right? You have to meet all of these qualifications in order to be eligible for that money. And we're seeing that with the eviction, the grants available to individuals to avoid being evicted is that there's pots of money sitting around that they can't give away because people don't meet all that criteria.
Yeah.
Or they don't jump through the hoops to get the signatures or the paperwork or whatever. So we wanted to, as much as we were able, be able to provide our funds for exactly what was needed. And for the most part, we're doing that.
So you're getting your funding is not coming from the government then?
Not primarily, no.
So how do you get your funding?
The community is, 75 to 80%, something like that.
Just donations through the community.
We have several churches that support us, some monthly, some sporadically, but we have a lot of church support. But the bulk of our money is coming from individuals, businesses. So yeah, Kankakee County.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
and it's a double-edged sword because what you said with you're not getting all that you're not applying for all those grants and getting all that money flowing through the door, but the money you do get, you can do what you want with it without those restrictions.
Right.
Which is a beautiful thing, actually.
Yeah. And now obviously we have a budget, but
well, no, I know it's not just like, hey, we're just doing what we want, pizza party tonight,
right.
Obviously there's, you have a plan.
Yeah.
You're not going to just do whatever, but it leaves you open to actually serve what really needs to. And so many different people have, as you've seen, so many, everyone has so many different needs. Mm-hmm. It's not just, everyone doesn't fit into one box,
right,
or one category.
So we're able to assess what those needs are. And for some people, it's the need of down payment and first month's rent. Like they have a full-time job at McDonald's, but they can't save enough for that first month's rent or deposit, which if you're in the shoes of a lot of our individuals with a not so great financial or rental record, there's landlords that sometimes will ask for 3 months worth of first month rent or deposit. So that number is not necessarily like $1,200. It's $2,400 or something like that.
Yeah, because of their past.
Right. And this is happening even more now because landlords have had a very difficult time.
Extremely difficult time.
Yeah.
So even if, a person doesn't have a bad record, they might still be saying, you know what?
Yeah.
The experience I've had these last 2 years, I'm going to need more money from you.
So sometimes they just need that pot of money to get them into the place, but they can sustain themselves once they're in there. The other thing that we have done is, if you think about the individuals who come to us rarely have any more possessions than the backpack that they carry with them all the time. So, okay, they get an apartment. How are they going to, what bed are they going to sleep in? What couch are they going to sit on? What pots and pans are they going to cook with? They have nothing. And so what we do then is we ask the community, we put out a list. This is exactly what we need. And they provide, and we are able to furnish the entire apartment with, all the basic needs to get them started. So it's things like that. It's learning what those needs are and figuring out a way to fill it.
So, so what is the homeless situation like in Kankakee County right now?
We're crisis level.
And what determines that to be crisis level?
Yeah, that's just me saying it's no, here's where we're at. So for the first time since we started, which is 3 years ago now.
Well, you said 2016, right? Or was it 20?
We opened the shelter January 2019.
Okay.
So this will be our third year.
Okay.
January 20. Third year, math. So this is the first time that we have started filling up regularly. So in the past, I could count on one hand probably the nights that we've filled to capacity and had to turn people away. And so now it's pretty much every night we're filling to capacity and at times we're having to turn people away, which is always terrible. And I'm getting calls all the time from individuals. I got evicted. I'm a single mom with 3 kids living in my car. The eviction crisis is just starting. So this is going to get way worse as those evictions get through the courts. And on top of that, like we just said, it's much, much more difficult to get into an apartment now than it was 2 years ago.
Because of this whole crisis.
So there's this whole ripple effect that's from the pandemic. So we have that coming. And so we're already seeing that. So we actually met last week, maybe earlier this week, with all of the homeless providers and a representative from the city. And we had a roundtable discussion of here the crisis is here. What are we going to do? Because we are at capacity. Salvation Army is at capacity.
Oh, they are taking
hotel
you vouchers. Yes.
Yeah. They run out of hotel vouchers every week. And funding to
pay for those vouchers, right?
Yeah. Yep. And they are at their capacity really with case managers as well. Their caseloads are tapped out. KCCSI is, pretty much at their limit in terms of what they're able to do. And so, as I'm talking to all these providers, everyone says we are doing as much as we're able to do, basically. And so we've reached out to the city. We've brainstormed some crazy ideas, trying to figure out what are we going to do to house people this winter. And we don't have a solution yet. So we, we're kind of clinging onto a couple ideas that may or may not pan out. But the bottom line is I don't think we are going to be able to meet everybody's needs this winter. So we have a lot of people that live in their cars.
Yes.
A lot of people. A lot of people live in abandoned homes. A lot of people are doubled up. So they're sleeping on somebody's couch. So there's a ton of people that we never see because they're managing somewhere else. But yeah, it's a bad situation.
What are you able to talk about some of the possible solutions, or what is the solution in your eyes? It's obviously more space, but that requires more money,
right?
As well. I feel like the space part is not really the issue. It's the money, right?
The space part is definitely an issue.
It is. Okay. Because I was just thinking of all these buildings that you could do something with, but it comes back to, well, let's say we've got an okay for this building, but we don't have the funds,
Right. There's not as much appropriate buildings for sheltering as you may think. Yes, there's a lot of buildings that aren't being used, but they're not appropriate for sheltering. Shelter facilities have to have sprinklers, so that's a non-starter for most places.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of places don't have. You're talking about the overhead sprinkler system. Yeah, you're right. That is cutting out a lot already.
Yep. But no matter what we would look to, another space, you'd have to get city approval. You'd have to get permitting. None of that happens quickly. And none of it is easy. If you look at our history of, getting permits and approvals, it's a long process. So none of it's going to happen in the next few months, for this winter.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are things that people can do now? Are people opening up their homes? I mean, what?
Oh, I never really suggest that.
I'm sure you don't, because obviously you do that then.
Yeah. Limits and boundaries are very important working with this population. I've heard many, many horror stories. People, having the best intentions, wanting to help someone and getting hurt in the long run by those efforts. So, we always suggest leave it to, organizations to kind of make those decisions and be helpful in a safe, controlled environment, where we can have those boundaries. So the best recommendation I have is to support those organizations. We have, so you talked about space. Space is definitely an issue.
Yeah, because isn't Gift of God closed now too? Or is that open still?
It is currently closed. I don't want to speak for them per se. I can say I know. I just
figured, you're talking about this community of spaces, and I figured they're probably in that.
It is.
I would think
it is a space.
I mean, it's right. It's a space. It's one of the facilities in the area.
Yeah. So I know that they have a desire to reopen. I think first for day stuff, and then hopefully for overnight. But I that's all I know.
Yeah, I know you can't speak on their behalf. I was just curious on whether.
Yeah, it is a possibility. In terms of how many they can shelter, that I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know how big of an impact that would make on the large numbers that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure at this point, every little bit is going to help.
Yeah.
Now, your facility is in downtown,
mm-hmm.
and that the fact that finally got passed. I mean, how long did that go on for? Over a year?
Yeah, we applied last summer and was denied, and you can't reapply for another 12 months. So we reapplied this summer, and we're able to get that approval. It was contingent on it only being 1 year. So we know that they're not going to reapprove us for next shelter season.
So when is the jig up? When is the date?
Yeah. Well, our shelter season ends May 1.
Okay.
And we would reopen October 1. So we know that come October 1, we're not going to be at St. Paul's 5 days a week.
Okay.
So the goal is to have our new shelter by October 1.
Yeah. So I know that is you've been showing the details of the plans online, which is super exciting. The fact that you have been the Fortitude Community Outreach has been able to get access to land and funds and all this to actually build a building. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the corner of Court and...
It's not on the corner, but it's on basically Court and Washington, but just north of CVS. So CVS is at Court and Washington.
Yeah.
And then just to the north of that is just a grassy, it's actually two plots of land.
It is two
together.
Plots. So you have one. You have one of those.
We have both.
You do have both.
It's
okay.
not. Neither one is large, but so that whole grassy area between CVS and the next house is ours. So yeah, it's a perfect location in my mind.
And how did that get into your hands? I mean, I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. probably one of the most fun things about my job is that you never know what's going to fall into your lap. You never know what's going to show up in the mail. You never know what message you're going to get on your phone.
Or who's going to show up at the door, or what's going to show up at the door.
Yeah, and sometimes it's bad news, and a lot of times it's great news.
Oh,
and
that's good.
So, little aside, you've seen the movie, what's the one with Tom Hanks where he gets stranded on an island?
Oh, Castaway.
Castaway.
Yeah, of course.
Wilson.
Wilson. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Wilson.
There, at the end when he's rescued and he's talking to his friend and he talks about, getting to a point where he's so low, he was thinking of ending it. And then he decided not to. And then suddenly there was a storm and then there was a sail. And, he's talking about this fact that we don't know what's going to happen. And then one day the thing that's going to change your life suddenly shows up. And so I get those moments often, which is so exciting. So a year ago, we started we got a steering committee together. We were looking at buying a building. The problem was that every building that was in our price range would have cost an exorbitant amount of money to rehab because usually you're looking at asbestos removal, mold removal, ADA compliance, and
sprinkler
system. Yep. On top of just, retrofitting the building.
Yeah. And of course, the thing is, we've got plenty of buildings.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Plenty.
Yeah.
But
we got to pay to get it up to code and rehab it.
Yeah.
And then any building that, was newer and wouldn't need all that, we couldn't afford. We're talking millions of dollars for buildings like that.
Yeah.
So we actually were offered a building to be donated to us, but we had that priced out, and it would have been $2.1 million to rehab it.
Wow.
So you can get the buildings for free. You can't afford to rehab it.
Yeah.
So I got a call from Jeff Satoff, just a local guy, earlier this year, probably in May. And he was like, I got this piece of land in an auction. I thought I'd do something with it and it hasn't panned out. And just wondering if it's something you can use. And so we went and looked at the land. It was in this perfect location. There's bus stops all over it.
Yeah.
It's out of downtown, which we know everybody wants.
Mm-hmm.
But it's close enough to all the services that they need in that area. And
yeah, because it's not like it's really that far from like Schuyler. I mean, it's, it's right there.
Yeah, incredibly walkable to anything that they would need. But, it's not right on the main drag. It's not right in the middle of a part in town that's really a focus of development. So to us, it was really a perfect spot. And so we started working with the city on, is this something we think that the city would approve? It had liens on it. Will the city forgive the liens, which they did? And so that was like a 7-month process before we could even tell Jeff, yes, we'll accept the land.
Mm-hmm.
So poor Jeff had to keep mowing the lawn and paying taxes on it the whole time.
Yeah.
Until we were able to say, yes, we can accept that. And then, so we priced that out about the same time that we were pricing out the potential building donation. That would have been $2.1 million. This is going to be like $550,000. So that was a no-brainer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's still amazing, even considering the talk of cost of materials these days too. Yeah. But I suppose you're starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. So.
Yep. And we're doing it's like a wood frame. This is not my area of expertise. You can tell construction. I'm learning a lot. But
I was going to say, that would be another learning curve for everybody.
But it's kind of a like pole barn type, it's called a Graber building. But so that saves us a little cost from your, typical wood frame building. It's not going to be a huge facility, but it meets our needs. It meets exactly what we need.
Is it bigger than St. Paul, the school?
Yeah.
The old St. Paul school where you're at?
Almost double.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the beauty of this building is that it's super open, design inside, so that we have eyes on everybody all the time. And that is so important on an emergency shelter because you can come in, I don't know you at all.
Yeah, and then you've got someone maybe who's been staying there for a couple weeks who you've gotten to know.
Mhm.
So, and you're it's almost like that person that's been there for a couple weeks or however long is trusting you to bring in someone that's not going to hurt them or whoever's with them.
And my volunteers and my staff.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, so safety is very important. We also get overflow from Harbor House because they're seeing the same crisis that the rest of us are.
Yep.
Domestic violence has risen incredibly since the pandemic started for obvious reasons. And so we're getting individuals who have, done their whole stay at Harbor House or they're full. So we often have women that are in very delicate situations, very vulnerable situations, and our facility has both men and women in it and can have children also. So you want to have eyes on everybody, and you want to make sure that you're providing that security for everyone that's in there. One of the great things about this building is that it has 2 private rooms with 2 bunk beds in each, so 4 beds in each one. And so if we had like a mother with 3 kids, they could have their own private space, or just someone who had some special needs or very vulnerable individual could have that private space. So we're very excited about being able to do that. With the pandemic, it's also a place where we can isolate people if necessary. But yeah, that type of design is exactly what we needed. So we were able to design it exactly as we wanted. It also has 3 transitional housing units built onto the back of it. So they don't have direct access to the shelter. They're standalone, accessible, but they are attached to the back of the building. And so
that's for people that are, it's almost like they can stay there in one of those units before actually having their own.
Yep.
It's kind of a practice.
Yep. So that's for individuals that have been staying with us who are ready for a next step, but maybe not ready to live on their own yet. And that's a place where they can, start contributing. They can, pay us some rent, but not like a full market rent.
And you're not going to be like, give me $700.
Right. Yeah, that's not going to prepare you to save money.
No.
But that, helps them be responsible, learning how to pay rent, but also being able to save for their own place. So we're really excited about that. And them being on site with us gives us the ability to provide some good oversight and supervision.
Yeah, and almost kind of coach them with budget and all that. I mean, how many of us that aren't homeless don't know how to budget for crying out loud? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's I'm one of them. Yeah. It's just something that is not. I feel like it's not taught enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and when you're living on minimum wage.
Yeah, or less. I mean, depending on what your situation is.
Yep.
So I'm sure some people are wondering what is, the situations, obviously, as we've said many times, everyone's situation is different. But what is a situation like with someone who has some type of a learning disability or developmental disability or addiction? I mean, what is that really, what do you do to help that addict that's also homeless? I mean, how does that situation approached?
You're right. Everybody is different. So we do those individual assessments and try to figure out what each individual needs. So I'll give you a couple examples. We have an individual now who was released from federal prison. I was not aware that we keep federal prisoners in Kankakee County, but we do.
That would, I think that goes with Now I'm not an expert on this, but I do know that Jerome Combs Detention Center, the county, they do work. They obviously work with ICE, but they will work with the FBI and even U.S. Marshals.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that might tie into what you're talking about. So
we got a call from them. There's somebody being released. He's homeless. He was homeless before he, started serving his time. And so I was dubious. You have your preconceived notions, but we serve everybody. As long as you can live in a communal setting and follow the rules. We try not to judge
discriminate.
you. Mm-hmm. And so they brought him over and they said, we think he has dementia. So what showed up was this adorable, funny, older man who, by all appearances, wouldn't hurt a fly. Now, obviously, at some point in his past, something must have happened. It was
questionable, yeah.
But he does have severe dementia, and we're shocked at how he finds our place every night. Now, our homeless community all helps each other. They kind of pal around together during the day. So he has a lot of assistance from other guests who help him during the day and make sure that he gets there. But every night he comes, every night he asks if we feed them. Every night he asks, where's the bedroom? Every night he asks, where do I go to get food? He'll get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and get lost back. I mean, literally across the hall is his bed, gets lost. And so it's very sad. And so we have spent the last 3 weeks trying to figure out
how can you?
He needs more help than we can provide.
I mean, it's almost like you need a memory care.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's like it's something new to experience for you guys.
So we have been working with his parole officers from Chicago. We've been working with Catholic Charities, Senior Services down here. But all of that is a process. Trying to get him into a memory care facility, needs a psychiatric evaluation. So we work with other agencies, other individuals all the time to try to meet these particular needs. We probably have the hardest time in connecting individuals with substance abuse services. So I think some of that is just the nature of substance abuse services, which is you got to want it.
That all comes back to that. You can kick them as much as you want, but that's not going to change anything.
Right. And so addiction providers are not going to come seek you out.
No, they're not.
So they're there if somebody wants to go, like the Salvation Army. If somebody says they're ready to go to rehab, they will drive them up to Chicago, their rehab facility, the next day. And we know that. So we just continue to work with them with our relationship focus. Try to work with them to the point where we're building back their self-esteem. We're building up their hope until they're ready for it. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and everybody has those particular needs that we try to meet. Right.
Now, what are the rules for Fortitude for someone that, do you line up at a certain time every day, or are you promised a spot? Like, how does all that work?
We have had an agreement, we have had a rule, and the city, expects it of us that they don't loiter at our site until 6:00. They can start lining up at 6:00 p.m. Okay. Doors open at 6:30. When they leave at 7 a.m, they need to go off site. Yeah. And they do a very good job of maintaining that. They know that that's not allowed. So when we started filling up, we had to kind of reassess, because before that it was first come, first serve. And what we realized that we had the vast majority of individuals that stayed with us regularly were people that men who were working, a few individuals who were elderly, and then probably 4 or 5 women who we felt were vulnerable enough that they should not be on the streets. And so we created a priority list, and we told those individuals, because if you're working, you need a good night's sleep. Like, we're pro go to work every day.
Yeah.
And
obviously.
so, we want to prioritize that they come and get a good night's sleep. So those individuals have until 8 o'clock to show up. We guarantee them a bed. And if they don't come by 8 p.m. or don't call us to say that they are running behind, then we open up the whatever else is available to individuals who aren't on that priority list. So those individuals tend to be ones who are kind of more chronic individuals, and probably, if they didn't have a bed, we know that they have some other way of surviving on the street. So not ideal, but better that than somebody who has to get up and work a 10-hour shift at McDonald's tomorrow.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I can only imagine, especially when it starts to become cold.
Yeah.
I mean, you can obviously die from it being,
and they do.
You get hypothermia or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it hypothermia, right? Am I right in that usually?
Yeah, or frostbite.
If it's cold enough.
Yeah, and that was actually probably the biggest impetus for us starting Fortitude, was that I had heard from a retired Kankakee police officer that people die every year, at least at that point. People die every year on the streets because of exposure to the elements. So, that was kind of one of those things that changes, at least for me, just changed. Like, I know we can do better.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it. I know we have enough funds and enough care in the community to not have that here. So if we've prevented that, or if we can prevent that in the future, that's my goal.
So going forward, what do you need the most? I'm sure everything you need help with, but I'm sure there's certain things that you immensely need help with. I don't know if it's volunteers or more supplies, funding. I mean, probably all the above. But is there anything in particular like that there's misconceptions about Fortitude, or anything you want to clear the air on?
We get asked all the time if we will accept clothing, and we do not accept clothing. It takes up a ton of room. It takes up a ton of time.
Is it just because you have to like wash it and all that kind of stuff, or?
You have to organize it all by size, by I mean, it's takes up a lot.
Yeah.
So there's another organization in town at the Lussu Center that that's their gig, is they do clothing, and so they will offer free clothing
to you, right? If you need it.
Yeah, to anyone. But so we directly connect our individuals to them for clothing. We do we try to keep hoodies. We try to keep coats.
Things that keep you warm.
Right.
Yeah.
And winter boots, because we feel like those are kind of essential things.
Yes.
So, yeah, people ask us about that all the time. I think some people, get disappointed that we can't, but to be honest, we are out of space. We have a very large storage unit that is
chock full of.
It's full. Yeah. And then our space at St. Paul's is basically taken, short of us becoming really cluttered there, which, of course, we're guests in that environment, so we don't want that to happen. So we basically have what we need. There's a few things that we list on our website and our Facebook that we'll always need just because they're consumed. Men's boxers are one of those things that underwear. We give out a lot of.
Well, sure, because they wear out. Yeah. Your underwear wears out.
Yeah.
So
we get thousands of free socks from Bombas every year.
Cool.
They advertise that on the radio. Free sock, buy one, get one. Yeah. For the homeless, and they are good on that. So we have plenty of socks, and they love those. And when we get our new space, we'll have lots of storage, so we can start. We like to collect things so that when people get into apartments, we can get them right into it. But so our biggest needs right now are funding that capital campaign to build the new building. So we need $350,000 from the community. We're going to finance about $200,000. We're at about $50,000 right now, so we have a ways to go. But we also need to have our operations continued at the same time. And so,
Right.
we try to encourage people right now to really think about what's a sacrificial gift. Look at your finances. What's something you could give as a one-time donation towards the building? But we also encourage people to continue to give. Some people give, a recurring donation online so they don't have to think about it. And some people just send us money every once in a while. So those things are definitely needed because we need staff and supplies and insurance and all those types of things just to keep running. But we also always need volunteers. So our shelter volunteers have to do an hour training to be able to do that. And we'll start those up again in January. But people can sign up to just serve a meal. You could come in and just serve the meal for a night, which is a good gateway.
I was going to say it's a good way to kind of get your feet wet.
Yep. We have people sign up to bring all of our food. So, you might sign up to bring the oatmeal for tomorrow's breakfast.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be hard. Or you can make the pulled pork, So there's different levels of commitment there. We right now have put a hold on street outreach because we're filling up. We need all hands on deck at the shelter. But most people that we've been serving on the streets are at the shelter now. So
yeah,
but that's for sure. We do that in the summer. So there's always a place if that's something you want to volunteer at. We are always in need of more volunteers. So funds and volunteers are really our biggest need.
And it's fortitudecommunityoutreach.org?
Yep.
Okay. So people can find out more there. Obviously, Facebook and Instagram as well.
Yep.
And anything else?
I don't know. I mean, I know your intention, your podcast is really to celebrate Kankakee County. And I would mirror that. I think we, like any municipality, any area, we have our things. But I'm so proud of how people consistently come together to support our work with the homeless. I know that there's a lot of other people that are also helping the homeless. There is a compassion, there is a concern, and people are willing to put their money where their concern is. So I just praise the people of Kankakee County for that, and we're happy to partner with them.
Yeah, well, praise you for all the work you're doing. I mean, you couldn't, Fortitude Community Outreach couldn't have come at a better time.
Mm-hmm.
And considering with, the Salvation Army, shelters closing, and other facilities having a hard time or closing as well, and then opening right before the pandemic in the old St. Paul school.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah, God has a plan. I could not have figured this. If you asked me 3 years ago if we'd be here, I would laugh at you.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's guided us the entire way, and he'll continue to. And so that's exciting.
Yeah, well, you have our full support. Whatever I can do to help spread the word, about getting that funding for the building or anything like that, you just let me know.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to get the word out.
Great.
So, Dawn, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I learned a lot today. Good. So, and there's so much. I know, as I say with almost every guest, we could go on forever.
Yeah.
It's such a deep topic, so many facets, and you, I'm sure, have so many stories of things that you have seen.
Yeah, I'm going to write the book someday.
Yeah, and then you'll be back to talk about the book.
There you go.
All right, so you heard it, fortitudecommunityoutreach.org. Also find them on Facebook and Twitter. And that will conclude this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you so much for listening. If you could do me a favor and please subscribe, rate us, Give us a review wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media as well at Kankakee Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media platforms at Kankakee Podcast. You can sign up for our mailing list as well at kankakeepodcast.com. And our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.
People tend to stick to you.